All right. Hello. Welcome, AP Kids. This is our first flipped lecture. This is crazy, right? Are you at Starbucks? You should be at Starbucks. You should be listening to me in Starbucks. I think my voice sounds better in Starbucks. That's what I think. All right. But anyways, let's move on. This is chapter 25, part 1. This is part 1 of a 5-part series. Yeah, for this chapter. So let's go ahead and get a move on because I only have 15 minutes because this is the free version. All right, so chapter 25, Colliding Worlds. So Columbus and other European explorers, they're looking for a new route to Asia, and they're hoping to find, really what they're hoping to find is Asia, but they don't find that. They're hoping to find gold and silver and other valuable resources. Now, in the beginning, they find so little that they consider, quote, of value that they stop exploring. And there's this sort of period of time where nothing is going on, and they're really just bonking around the Americas trying to find a way through. However, European interest in the Americas is sort of reignited, sadly, when the Spanish come into contact with the two major empires in the region, the Aztecs in Mesoamerica and the Inca in South America. We know what happens there. In addition, Europeans soon realized that by using the enslaved natives and importing African slaves, they could make a lot of money by growing things that they wanted but didn't necessarily need, like sugar, tobacco, and other crops. This is a quote from an anonymous Aztec poet from a document called From Flowers and Songs of Sorrow. We are crushed to the ground. We lie in ruins. There is nothing but grief and suffering in Mexico and Tlatelolco, where once we saw beauty and valor. I should not read quotes anymore, and I won't. All right, as the excerpt from that poem basically says, initial contact and the later conquest and colonization of the Americas was not good for native peoples. So the question is, why did the Europeans want to explore? Well, there are several reasons. One, the Italian cities with ports on the Mediterranean had a monopoly on European trade with Asia. By controlling access to the trade routes, the Italians controlled the prices and drove up the prices and forced everybody else to kind of seek their own routes. So that they could cut out the middlemen. And there's also new technology. New tech makes the long journeys easier and safer. I mean, as safe as they could be for the time. So, for example, the magnetic compass, initially invented in China, it makes it easier for you to steer the ship in the right direction, which is always helpful. The Astrolabe, which allows you to determine how far north or south you are from the equator, which also, if you have a good map, lets you know where you are. And the Caravel, originally a Portuguese ship. It's a 3-masted ship, and its design allows you to sail through rougher seas and bigger storms with less chance of, death and sinking. Many Europeans also believed it was their Christian duty to convert other people and to go and convert the heathens. So says Vasco da Gama. So let's talk about demographic and environmental changes. Demography, which refers to population patterns and changes, is, as we know, sadly, an important feature in the European conquest of the Americas. Oh, look, that's what I just said. People in the Americas and Oceania were isolated, and they just had no defense against the diseases which had been brought to them by the Europeans. They had no exposure to those germs. Now, European horses and gunpowder and, swords and metal weapons and things like that were instrumental in, subjugating the native populations. Disease was really the knockout blow and responsible for the majority of the deaths in the area. Some of the people who were decimated by diseases, with the big one being smallpox, but also measles and influenza, were the Taínos in the Caribbean, the Aztecs in Mesoamerica, and the Inca in South America. When the Europeans show up, they're already immune essentially to smallpox. And, by this point it is just spread by coughing. And so once one person gets it, it's a wildfire. There's nowhere to go. Historians estimate that the indigenous population fell by more than 50% through disease alone in that less than a century. And some places lost, again, 90% of the population. So the Columbian Exchange, here is a cool little infograph. I think we've seen this before, but just in case, take a look at it. Now, along with all of these things, but germs and diseases were one part of the Columbian Exchange. You have to remember that this is all thing. Another major component, again, is this new crops and livestock. Before the Columbian Exchange began in around 1500 or so, Mesoamerican peoples didn't eat a lot of meat. Although when I think of Mexican food, pork, beef, and cheese is pretty awesome. Al pastor. Oh God, I'm hungry. The people of Mexico knew nothing of pigs or cows until it was brought over to them. These animals and Mediterranean foods like wheat and grapes were brought to the Western Hemisphere and would eventually become staples of our diet. In fact, I'm trying to cut out more wheat. Dang. Another domesticated animal that the Europeans brought was the horse. And I mean, how can you imagine like the Old West and, the Native Americans without the horse? It transforms the culture of the Native Americans living in the plains regions. Along with the animals and the livestock, the Europeans also brought things that were a little less awesome, animals we didn't want, like mosquitoes and certain kinds of rats. But the Europeans would take things back to Europe, like corn and potatoes, tomatoes, beans, and peppers, and chocolate. Chocolate. The potato, I like potatoes too, became so popular in Europe that we sort of think of it being indigenous to certain places. You can't think of Italy without tomato sauce, and you don't think of Ireland without potatoes, but they are actually from the New World. Now, of course, people, sadly, were also a part of the exchange. The arrival of enslaved Africans to the Americas. Bad. I don't know why that did that. The arrival of Africans to the Americas brings a lot of biological and demographic changes. Africans bring new crops like okra and rice with them. As part of the Atlantic slave trade, tobacco and cacao produced on American plantations are being sold to Europe because, smoking and chocolate are essential for survival. Not really. And were sold to everybody in Europe, including in the Middle East, despite the fact that millions upon millions of Africans were essentially kidnapped from their home. Because of the introduction of some of these new foods, the population overall actually in Africa grows in the 16th and 17th centuries because of just some of the nutritious foods that were introduced into the continent. Yams and manioc were introduced to Africa from Brazil. Definitely the minuses outweigh the pluses, but, there were a lot of pluses. So anyways, that's it, actually. Wow, I'm just going to be under 10 minutes. I'm amazing. This is your homework. Suddenly you think I'm less amazing. So after you have taken notes on this quick little sub-lecture here, I want you to use your textbook or any other sort of item that is going to help you do this. Write a quick outline on the effects of the Atlantic slave trade on Africa. Be sure to discuss the pros and the cons. Please do this in your notebook, and you can title it Connections Assignment Number 1. Bye.